Great. I see we have a few more people that have joined here just after the 9 o'clock. So I think we can probably go ahead and kick it off here. And again, thank you all for joining today. This conversation that we're going to have on impact and measurement. It's really a great opportunity following up on two great articles, two-part articles by Alisha and Kathy, and now this chance to have a webinar to share more and to reflect more and to have the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over here to Alisha and Kathy. Alisha, coming from Rounding Third, also the founder of the Sports Impact Leadership Certificate and the director of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Sports Award. And then we also have Kathy Babiak, professor at University of Michigan and the director of the Center for Sport and Social Responsibility. So it's really amazing, wonderful opportunity for this presentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to Alisha and Kathy.
Great. Thanks so much, Eli. We're really excited to be here with everyone. We're going to turn off our video just for the presentation, and then we'll turn it back on for Q&A. So I'm going to do that really quickly. And thank you so much for having us. And Kathy and I are here today to discuss measurement and evaluation with you all.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy, and just before we jump in, we want to introduce ourselves a little bit more and share some more of our background with you. So,
all right. So this is Alisha, and I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. Kathy and I work independently as well as collectively in the field of sports impact. I've been working in sports philanthropy for over 17 years. Close to a decade ago, I created my company, Rounding Third LLC, through which I'm the founder and co-director of the Sports Impact Leadership Certificate in partnership with Johns Hopkins University. And as Eli said, I also oversee the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Sports Award. And lastly, which is what brings me here today with all of you, is my work on strategy, programming, and evaluation with organizations at the intersection of sport and philanthropy.
And this is Kathy. I'm based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and even though Alisha and I are separated by geography, we've worked together really in various capacities over the past 15 years, including probably about 12 or 13 of those, of which I've been a reviewer for the Robert Wood Johnson Sport Award. And I've been a professor at the University of Michigan for the past 16 years. And my research is really centered on the social impact of sport organizations, from the professional sport context to community sport to sport organizations internationally. And my research has looked at corporate social responsibility in various forms, from philanthropy to environmental sustainability in sport organizations and businesses. And right now, I'm in the midst of launching the new Michigan Center for Sport and Social Responsibility, which is going to be a hub of research and practical resources for sport organizations throughout the world who are interested in really the nexus of sport and social impact.
So in addition to collaborating on third-party evaluations in the past, Kathy and I recently co-wrote a two-part series, as Eli mentioned, of articles published on sportanddev.org, and we encourage you to read the articles if you haven't already.
So several of the questions that we pose or discuss in the articles are really going to be relevant to our conversation today, including questions like, how do you know right now that you're making the difference that you desire with your programs and initiatives? Are you measuring impact against desired strategic outcomes? And really get you to thinking about what will work best for you in terms of evaluations for your own organizations. And we hope that this webinar will really prompt you to think about what are some of the strategic applications of measurement, evaluation, and impact in your own organizations.
We have a lot to cover in the short amount of time we have. Our goal is to highlight some key themes, such as defining the many terms used for measuring impact, reviewing what is involved in data collection and the process of communicating results. And we'll have about 20 minutes or so after our presentation to hear from you with questions and hopefully your own experience in this area.
And we're hoping that everyone will walk away with some tidbit or salient information from this webinar to really help maximize your approach and effectiveness in measurement and evaluation, and ultimately increase the value and impact of your programs and initiatives. So our aim is to make this session informative, fun, and engaging for all of you out there participating today. So this quote is really a good reminder about the challenges of measurement and evaluation. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. It's not always a magic pill for sport and development organizations, and what you ultimately do with what you count and measure is just as important as identifying what it is you actually want to count. And we want to emphasize that evaluation needs to happen methodically. It works best as part of an organization's everyday activities and part of the broader strategy than a one-time effort. So through our session, we'll prompt some questions for you to consider whether you're just starting out or have been involved and engaged in measurement and evaluation already and are looking to enhance and improve. And if we don't answer your questions today, in the short time we have together, we're happy to keep this conversation going with you after this webinar. So nonprofits of all kinds, including sport for development organizations, have a responsibility to be as effective and impactful as possible. And additionally, in a competitive environment of today, those organizations can demonstrate and show how they're authentic in their impact. And in doing so, they may be more likely to be able to attract resources, partners, volunteers, human capital, and so on, which is why understanding impact through measurement and evaluation is critical. And to help with our framing, it's important to understand that many aspects, features, and elements of your organization can be measured, and making a difference can be interpreted in numerous ways. So some of you may be interested in evaluating the accountability of your organization as a whole. So thinking about the quality and frequency of reporting, transparency and governance, and so on. Others might be interested in sort of considering what effectiveness and impact through the program processes. So the systems of an organization and management, typically referred to as more of a formative assessment. Questions around processes might include, are you reaching the targeted participants or recipients effectively? Is the program being implemented and planned as you intended and designed? How is the program evolving or progressing compared to a month ago or to a year ago? What challenges have you faced, and what new ones are on the horizon that you might have to attend to ensure effectiveness? And then finally, you may also want to consider, and typically what most people think about in evaluation is program impact. What are some of the outputs and outcomes? And this is typically referred to as summative evaluation. And program impact questions might include things like, what are the intended outcomes of your program? And what changes do you hope to achieve in the participants who are engaged? Did the program yield the same results for all participants? Was it more effective for some And if so, why would that be the case? So in this webinar, we're going to really mainly focus on the measurement evaluation for the program impact area versus the process or accountability areas, as it's really central to understanding the impact and difference for your sport for development organization. So we're happy to answer questions in other areas, but that's sort of going to be the main focus for our next several minutes together.
So it helps to define the terms just so we're all on the same page. I think many of us have these definitions in our minds, but just so you understand what we're going through today, so we have a standard definition for all of us. Measurement being the collection of information on which a decision is based, and evaluation, the use of that measurement in making decisions. I think monitoring is also a part of this, which is the tracking and reporting of priority information on a program or project. And then there's different ways to engage in assessing the impact. You have a formal evaluation, the monitoring towards a specific goal through the observations and checking progress or quality over a period of time. And then there's feedback loops to learn what's working and what's not over that period of time. And each of these activities is the type of performance measurement that we'll be talking about today.
So for the next few minutes, we want to give you a bit of a brief overview about each of these areas of the evaluation process or the impact journey in a little bit more detail. And so we're going to talk about these 4 areas and give you some details and things to think about for those of you who are engaging with measurement and evaluation. So how do you identify success? What does success look like? How might you want to make a plan to achieve those successes or get there through program evaluation? We'll very briefly talk about gathering and analyzing data. And then finally talk about communicating and assessing the findings from your evaluations. So we know in looking at the list of participants for today's webinar that some of you are very experienced already with the practice of measurement and evaluation. But just so that we're on the same page, we want to quickly review some fundamental concepts for measurement and evaluation and sort of define some questions, some key questions that it's really important to think about as you develop the evaluation section of any proposals to funders or other partners or stakeholders. So keeping in mind things like, what is your organization seeking to achieve, and what does impact look like for you? Are you interested in understanding local or community needs in order to make informed decisions for new programs? Are you looking to adopt effective program systems for implementation? Do you want to have a sense for your program outcomes to enhance impact? And those might be outcomes such as increased physical activity or sport participation, development of skills like teamwork, leadership, and so on, or assessing participant behaviors, attitudes, and perception changes after participating in a program or initiative or intervention. How are you planning on using your findings? To what end will you use and communicate what you found? What will you know after the evaluation that you didn't know before? And what will you do as a result of that evaluation that you couldn't do before because you lacked the relevant information? And then finally, how will your participants, clients, your organization, and the community even society as a whole be better as a consequence of the work you do and the efforts that you make through your programs and initiatives.
So one tool that is commonly used is the logic model as a framework for considering how your different projects and initiatives and programs contribute to your organization's goals and how you can track that progress along the way. So some of you might have a logic model already. Some of you maybe are revising one. And what the logic model does is it works backwards. So you start with the impact of what measurable change you're seeking to achieve in the long term, and then thinking through what outcomes and measurable change you're hoping to have in the short and intermediate term, and what will indicate that you're on your way to accomplishing those goals, and the outputs, which are the more tangible things you can measure immediately following a program, like attendance and participation levels and things like that. And then activities, which are the high-level steps you need to successfully run the program to get the outputs and the outcomes you're seeking. And lastly, the inputs, which are the resources such as money, staff, technology, that you need to invest in the program for it to be successful starting in the first place. So our second thing we want to talk about is the planning and the process, which are the costs, the stakeholders, and the timing for evaluation.
So we'll start off with the costs. So investing and committing resources into evaluation is a strategic investment for any organization. And it's important to know that evaluation costs really vary by the type of evaluation carried out, whether those might be comparison studies, experiments, or simple surveys, for example. And there are really 5 main components of an evaluation budget. And those include the evaluation staff and subcontractors or consultant time, if you're using an external or third-party evaluator. So essentially labor. And that would be really time around invested into planning, developing, validating data collection instruments, conducting the data collection itself, especially surveys or interviews, analysis, and writing. And generally that's a significant component of the cost. Travel may also be another line item, which is often to sites for data collection or to meet with program staff or to present reports, findings, interim reports, and so on. Other direct costs can be items like supplies, equipment, technology, software, perhaps purchasing existing survey instruments or data collection platforms, and possibly purchasing data sets if that's something that's relevant for your organization. Other costs may be overhead costs and fees that things like operating expenses of office space and utilities, but those costs are generally more relevant for large consulting firms or possibly university partners. And then there may be program costs necessary to support the evaluation itself. So staff time to engage in quality control or monitoring, building data systems for longer term evaluation and measurement, things like dashboards and so on. So it's helpful to really have a mindset that evaluation is a smart strategic investment in improving the program and organization, and ultimately can serve as a stepping stone to supporting more participants or beneficiaries more effectively. So when you think about your costs and budgets for evaluation, you might want to step back and maybe put your evaluation in the context of a longer term research agenda and really think about how you might want to break down chunks or elements of your evaluation over a longer term period to really maximize your resources. And that might allow you to spend or allocate your evaluation money more strategically by laying out, discrete studies that might build upon one another.
Right, so the second part of planning that we want to go over is the stakeholders. And what this really means is who are the key players in this process for you. When considering who they are, you need to look internally and externally. For some of you, the process will start with board approval and buy-in. And depending on the size and budget and structure of your organization, you might have someone, maybe it's even you, who internally is overseeing data collection and analysis. And I think some of the things that are often overlooked and are important are making sure that this person has the proper training that they need to be successful. Have you invested in their own professional development around evaluation so that they're building skills to support the organization further? Do they have the peer support to accomplish what they need? And overall, is the culture of the organization open to growing and learning from the evaluation process? If you have the opportunity to work with a third-party evaluator, how will that be funded and what should you be looking for? If funding is coming from outside the organization and not directly from your budget and your board, then thinking about how you're going to justify this funding and what your request is to a funder and why should they invest in your third-party evaluation. So the obvious things are that it's credible and unbiased insight into your work and it validates the impact that you have. But thinking about how they'll view it, which is, how does your work help them achieve their goals? So putting in perspective for a funder and explaining in detail how your impact aligns with their goals and helps them meet their own logic model that they have in place.
And so if you are able to secure funding and get a board approval, who's out there that might be able to conduct a third-party evaluation, and how might you find them? First, you might consider an academic partner. So a faculty or a researcher at a university or institution who have interest and expertise and might be seeking an interesting and relevant research project. And some advantages of academic partners is they have, you can identify targeted, relevant expertise and interests. They may have flexible schedules to adapt and meet client needs. There are possibilities for additional dissemination channels through academic journal publications, conference, or academic presentations, and maybe able to get broader insights around evaluation and best practices. And you may be able to find local academics who have knowledge of the local situation or context who can bring that kind of knowledge and expertise to their evaluation. Some of the challenges are that they may move at a little slower pace than specialized consultants or evaluators, and really finding the right expert who has availability and capacity to support an evaluation at that time.
When thinking about other third-party options, there's individual consultants and contractors, which you could find via word of mouth, asking peer organizations who they've used, and doing a formal RFP process where you would distribute through specific nonprofit channels and listservs, and even this group today probably. There's also companies, and we aren't endorsing these companies, but we know they're often used for organizations in the industry. There's UpMetrics, Hello Insight, Yardstick, and Precision are a few that we know of that are often used. And the last thing we want to say with this is, what should you look for in a third-party partner, which is a larger conversation, but a few key things. Someone who fits the culture of your organization is really, really important. And the availability and timing of what you're looking for and what they have available, that it lines up. And then the expertise and research needs are something that they have expertise in is also another area to think about.
Okay, so in terms of timing, we often hear the question about timing. When is it the right time to do an evaluation? And really, there's no right answer to this question. It's based on your own individual needs and objectives. But generally speaking, selected program activities or entire programs should have some evaluation informed over a period ranging from annually to every 2 or 3 years. And it really depends on the program life cycle, where your organization is at with particular programs. Some, for example, early or pilot evaluations might be beneficial to identify key issues early on in the program development so that any course corrections can be made. And decisions about your timing, your evaluations might be informed by evaluative information during critical planning, budgeting, leadership changes, communication cycles for your organization. But ideally, your overall program-wide evaluation strategy and plan should be developed really to map out planned evaluation activity over a multi-year time frame so that you have information that's produced that is timely without it being so frequent that you can't have enough time to act upon it and upon the recommendations from the evaluation. It's in sync with your program's management and decision process, and it complements other program data collection activities.
The next area we want to go over is gathering and analyzing the data. So what data to collect, what you can expect from the process, and each organization is different, and how you're collecting the data. Some might use written surveys, others might do it electronically. Sometimes it's a budget issue. We know internationally it's important to be mindful of the access to technology and making sure that the tools and questions are designed with different languages in mind and cultural norms as well. And then lastly, the actual analysis and interpretation of the data that you're collecting. So first here is what data to collect. And when thinking about this, you want to go back to that logic model that we talked about. So what information will it take to answer the evaluation questions that we have? And what data will indicate if the objective was met? There's indicators that must make sense given the design, the goals, and measurable objectives of the program being evaluated. If there's data available and it does need to be collected, there's some that might not need to be collected. You don't want to end up with too much data. So thinking through that is important. And if data is not available, you need to incorporate data collection into the evaluation plan. The use of multiple sources of data to corroborate findings is also important. And data will hopefully show changes in attitudes, behaviors, and perceptions as a result of your program. If you have an external funder investing in the evaluation, which we talked about as an option, be mindful of what that funder is looking for. Are there specific deliverables that you need to show for them? And this isn't an encouragement to mission drift, but more to make sure you are delivering the right data to the funder. And lastly, if you read our article, we mentioned that many organizations are aligning themselves with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So if you are doing that and are aligning with those goals, you want to collect data that ties back to them.
So in terms of collecting data, qualitative and quantitative data are the two main forms of data you probably typically will collect. Qualitative data offers descriptive information generally that may capture insights into experiences of participants or beneficiaries, behavior changes or influence, opinions, values, feelings, knowledge, or other kinds of observable phenomena. And three commonly used methods for gathering qualitative evaluation data are informant interviews or participant interviews, focus groups, and or participant observations while engaging in programs or initiatives. Quantitative methods refer to data or information that can be measured by numbers or tallies. Methods for collecting quantitative data, common ones include counting systems, surveys, questionnaires, or other types of measurable metrics like physical data, grades, etc. And so depending on your needs, you may consider the design of your data collection to identify the impact of your program by comparing your program participants to others who have not experienced or received an intervention through your program. So having a treatment versus a control group, sort of via the methods that I mentioned above. And generally, this type of design involves more complex evaluation and is generally more costly. Your evaluation may also try to identify changes and differences in participants, for example, before and after participating in a program or receiving an intervention. In this case, you collect data pre-program and then at some period post-program participation. And technologies are also really developing to more easily capture data, including, for instance, around fitness trackers to capture activity data, iPads or internet and mobile technology apps that may be helpful to collect data such as participant registration, involvement and attendance, and real-time experiences and perceptions. And in our article, we shared some trends about using technology for data collection, and as I mentioned, it's becoming more common, but also, you know, is a costly endeavor, and there may be some barriers around funding, language, and accessibility that exists. So one example that we talked about in our article were the San Francisco Giants Community Fund, who successfully collect data from youth participants in their programs in real time using iPads on the baseball fields for their baseball initiatives. And so they provide iPads to their coaches and youth leaders to collect data from their participants about their experiences in the program, their learnings, their perceptions, and then that data is sorted out by a third-party evaluator.
Once you have the data and the information, you want to analyze and interpret it. And for internal analysis, this is an ongoing process. If you're working with a third-party evaluator over a set amount of time, once the data has been collected, it's usually at least 6 to 8 weeks before any reporting can be done. And it takes time to review all that data thoroughly. If it is being done by a third-party evaluator, it is reasonable to ask them for updates, but you should expect to wait close to 2 months post-data collection for the full report. And it's also helpful to set that expectation for your board and any other stakeholders as well. What you can look for internally in your own data collection and what external evaluators will look for are patterns and themes and trends. So for example, are you seeing a pattern from a certain demographic, perhaps age, or gender, geographic location? And are there any key themes emerging as you're sorting through all of the data? Longitudinal studies will obviously require much more time for results to appear. And it's important to keep in mind that you might get unexpected results. They might not show the impact that was expected. It's important, again, that you set the expectation for your board and anyone else internally, but also externally if there's funders or other stakeholders as well.
So the final phase of the process is really how do you use the data and synthesize it into a report and then communicate around that. So it's really just as important to have a plan for what to do with the data once it's collected as it is to invest in the initial phase of evaluation. So disseminating your findings is critical. And so in thinking about dissemination and sharing your evaluation results, you might want to think about the purpose of dissemination. Is it for accountability, for justification, for program improvement, to highlight program improvement? And think about who you're communicating your findings to. So who's the audience that you will be sharing your information with? If you have an international audience, you may want to consider providing the findings or results in different languages. How you visually represent your findings through graphics or writing or other types of images. And finally, thinking about where are your channels of dissemination or distribution, through professional networks, through industry outlets, through data at conferences. And this is important to, share what you're doing, but also to learn and gather feedback and see what best practices are by your peers and colleagues.
So data visualization has become really a trend in getting more creative with how we're reporting data, moving beyond just the traditional report with the words on the page. So a few examples we highlighted in that article are a narrated report, that we have thought was a great way of using a voiceover actor who narrated their report in a video form. And it was fun and engaging, but also really informative. There's also conceptual animation where you have the data animated throughout a video that can be made probably yourself or from different companies that do this. And then virtual reality, which, there's definitely the cost barrier still, but it's a great way to immerse stakeholders and potential funders in your world of what impact you're having, and to be able to use your data to show that through VR is, emerging as a trend as well. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about storytelling, whether you're writing a grant, seeking funding, just generally communicating to stakeholders or your board of what impact you're having. And there's so many different ways of doing it, through pictures and video and images, and everything is so flexible and tailored now that it's really just adaptable through different languages and cultures, and really telling your story is at the heart of everything we all do. So it's great that there's so many new ways to do that.
So for this slide, we just want to spend a few minutes just highlighting our own evaluation experiences and what we've learned by working with clients and with other organizations in the industry. And so one of the clients that Alisha and I worked with together on a program evaluation was an organization called Positive Tracks. And Positive Tracks empowers youth of all backgrounds and abilities to use sport as a catalyst for social change through philanthropy, through volunteerism, and through community engagement. And a few years ago, Positive Tracks initiated a program evaluation and sought a third-party evaluator to lead the process, and partnered with Alisha and me to do this. And so it ended up being a 1.5 or 2 year evaluation process. And some of the things that we learned and which led to the success in the evaluation process included their strong and deep commitment and investment to evaluation. They sought funding from a third party who supported the evaluation. They put out a request for proposals, which was a competitive process. So they had identified a strategy and an objective for their evaluation, and they had a plan for it, which initially started off as a one-year evaluation, but throughout the process, it extended after they realized that there were some sort of shifts in some priorities. A second thing that really kind of contributed to the success of their initiative was really their intention and openness to really be collaborative and involved in the evaluation process throughout. So we were deeply connected with all of their stakeholders, from their staff to volunteers to their partners and to board members throughout the process. So there was complete total buy-in by all of their stakeholders. And a few of ours and positive tracks learning in the process were really around the need for flexibility and adaptability through this process. When we initially started working with them, they had 3 programs that they wanted to have evaluation completed on, but through the process, they realized that they really had a priority for 2 of those programs. So that became the focus of the evaluation. So we had to sort of shift and adapt our evaluation through that. It's really important too for evaluators and for the organizations themselves to have a deep understanding of the culture and brand and identity of the organization, and how that should be immersed and threaded and communicated through the evaluation and the materials, the reports that are produced in the end. Another thing that we learned was, in the case of having a third-party evaluator, it's really important to have clear and frequent channels of communication throughout the process, so that expectations, timelines, all that is communicated openly and clearly, so that you don't run into any snags or hurdles. And then finally, a big learning through that experience was the need to have, and this kind of ties into the connection and the communication piece, the need for support and access in coordinating the evaluation. So, access to organizational data and information and stakeholders and participants, for example, throughout the evaluation process. Working on those systems was really, it evolved through the period of the evaluation. And really, once that evaluation was completed, Positive Tracks was able to use the findings and the report to really make some shifts and changes. So they adapted and prioritized certain programs. They were able to form new partnerships. One of the things they wanted to get out of the evaluation was to understand how they might replicate and scale those targeted programs and those prioritized programs. They expanded their staff capacity. And then just last year, not solely because of the evaluation, but because of the good work that they've been doing, they received an industry recognition through the Beyond Sport Global Award. So that was one sort of experience that we had, we thought was would be helpful to highlight.
So I'm going to highlight more on the funder side. As I mentioned, I oversee the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Sports Award, which recognizes sports teams, athletes, community-based organizations that use sports to catalyze and sustain changes to make communities healthier places to live, learn, work, and play. And for those who don't know, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is the largest philanthropy in the United States dedicated solely to health. Through the annual award application process, I've reviewed how hundreds of organizations approach evaluation. So almost like an industry landscape, if you will, that I'll share with you a few things, a few themes that have come up over the years. There's definitely been a movement to more in-depth evaluations. So going from measuring outputs to focusing on outcomes. There's a trend of collaborating with academic partners and third-party evaluators for validation and credibility. And lastly, there's a shift from regarding impact just purely programmatically. So moving from programmatic interventions to more policy system change work, where if you're looking at it like a pyramid, where the smaller impact is eating healthy and exercising, the larger impact would be what is happening socioeconomically and what are those factors? What is your impact on those factors, such as poverty, education, housing, and inequality? So two of the questions that we ask our applicants, which you could think about yourselves, are explaining how you use sport as a platform to address the root causes that influence health, such as physical, social, and economic conditions. And also, how do you impact health equity so that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be healthier? And for impact and measurable results, we ask, how are you making your community a healthier place to live for all residents? Are you impacting community conditions and affecting system change? So again, thinking of it a little bigger picture than we probably do day to day, of what is your impact on policy and system change, as well as you're thinking about what data to collect.
So just before we move into a brief Q&A session, we just want to leave you with this quote that if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. And program evaluation is really nothing more than a systematic method for collecting, analyzing, and using information to answer questions, basic questions about a program. And whether you work at a large sport for development organization or a small one, it's really important to keep measurement and evaluation in mind as an integrated and strategic activity to enhance your impact. And you know, we've tried to highlight some of the key issues and questions around evaluation and impact. We may not have answered all your questions. I see there's some questions coming up through the system that hopefully we can answer today. If we can't answer them today, then we'll certainly be happy to get back to you. Alisha.
Yep, we're gonna open it up to questions and discussion. I know Eli already prompted you, and there's many things here. A few things, if you guys are thinking through this, what you're gonna put in the chat box. We'd love to hear what you're currently doing around measurement and evaluation, what trends you've seen yourself, and perhaps some partners that we didn't mention and resources that are out there. And lastly, we'd love to stay in touch. We wanna thank Eli and everyone for having us today, for listening, and you know, please keep in touch. Our contact information is here, and we'd love to hear what you have going on.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for a wonderful presentation and really informative and rich with material. And it's already telling because we have some excellent follow-up questions. I also have a few questions, but it looks like we'll have enough here to go sort of a rapid fire approach. We have about 10 minutes, 12 minutes, because we started 2 minutes late. So we can add 2 minutes here. But yeah, just sort of jump right in. I can read off the question just so everyone knows which question. Obviously, everyone can see the chat box, but I'll go ahead and just read the question we're addressing, and then perhaps Alisha and Kathy can just address briefly. And then we can also summarize these, make a document from these questions for any kind of follow-up we want to do. In terms of sharing all the material will be shared with all the attendees and so forth. And also we're recording today. So the first question here is a question of, in a complex system, how can sport projects best demonstrate their impact? And so I guess to me, just to add to that is like, why sport? You know, why sport has this impact? Why not education or music? Or, you know, how do we, in this complex system, show that sport for development can have this impact? What's unique about sport? And I guess it's a way to frame the question.
So I mean that's a great question, and certainly one that we all think about coming from the sport world. I think sport is often used as a hook to bring youth and individuals together, and it's really used as a platform for potentially broader other social impacts. So whether it's around teamwork and development or health and well-being, I think there's that platform that sport can be used as a social hook to address the issues that concern us in society today. And yes, it is a complex system. I think that's a really great question that not only sport for development organizations grapple with, but other nonprofits around the world. Is like, how do you know that you are making the impact you're making? I think it really does tie into the logic model. You can only measure what you intend to do, and some of the questions that Alisha alluded to around the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation are tough to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Sport Award. Tough to answer. How do you know your organization's making a broader social impact in communities?
That's great.
And Alisha, I don't know if you have any insights into how Robert Wood Johnson Foundation thinks about that. If you're a small sport for development organization that's focused on a local community, what's sort of your broader societal impact?
Well, I will say I want to make sure we get to some more questions. So I don't recall who wrote that, but whoever, please reach out directly. I'm happy to have a longer conversation, but I want to, out of respect for others, at least get to a few more. So yeah.
Excellent. That's a great question, Helen. Thank you so much. The next question is from Arno. Anything you can share in terms of experiences, lessons learned in the field of M&E in connection specifically with women empowerment and gender equality programs? So I guess that specific realm, perhaps, Alisha or Kathy. Just
one example I would say quickly to look at, and again, please reach out. We can throw out some more resources. Kids Play International, which is Tracy Evans' program. They've done a lot of work through gender equality evaluation and spent a lot of time thinking through it, and have developed a lot of evaluation tools for gender equality. So I would look into it and also connect with them. And if I'm happy to be that person to do that, please reach out.
And another organization here in the United States that I've partnered with is a Women's Sports Foundation, who really have a lot of resources and materials in the space of women empowerment and gender equity across all types of different sport organizations. So I think they would be a really great resource, and they've done some really fantastic research in that area as well.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So the next questions that I see from Javi and also Tramatobi, I'm going to combine those two. Thanks for your answer to those previous questions. This next question is about the resources. So are there resources for best practices to collect cultural competent, sensitive information, particularly with immigrants, undocumented, inclusive LGBT? And then the similar question about small size resources, limited resources. So I know you touched on it in your presentation, but perhaps just another kind of honing in on some key points there. Yeah.
I have a few things. Again, I'm very big on looking at what peer organizations are doing. There's no need to recreate here. So I'll answer the second one first. But so as far as the immigrant undocumented population, I highly, highly recommend Soccer Without Borders. They were an award winner last year. And they are another one who very sophisticated measurement system, such a developed logic model around this, and are an amazing resource. And for the LGBTQ I also believe You Can Play is one that has done a great job as far as understanding the audience and figuring out how to evaluate in that area. So I would connect with them just from that peer-to-peer level of learning. There's others too, please, again, reach out. And my quick thing as far as the small size nonprofits, I mean, we see that a lot with the award, and I fully understand it. And I think collaborating, there's two things I would say I mean, this is a larger conversation. Collaborating, maybe you could collaborate with another organization or a smaller nonprofit and together collect data and maybe somehow get it funded together. So think about how you could collaborate. The other thing I would say with that too is just talking your board. I mean, there might be a stakeholder or a funder that you maybe has, you could tap for this one specific project. And it doesn't need to be as extensive as we've talked about today. But again, happy to brainstorm with you. Please reach out, Kathy, if you have any other.
Yeah, I mean, I think for that point, whether you're a small or large sport for development nonprofit organization, it's important to start somewhere. And it can be as simple as, conducting an exit interview to get experiences and start keeping records and keeping track so that you have that information and that data. And so, yes, to echo what Alisha is saying, I think, partnerships and collaboration around this might be something that would be a strategy that smaller nonprofits could look to help support those types of measurement and evaluation activities.
Excellent. Yeah, and I believe that Paul Hunt had a great question too, to sort of, I think you touched on it actually, but just in terms of the three things you would recommend that prioritize first in terms of M&E. So I don't know if there's anything you want to expand on that. You sort of touched on it, but just to make sure, Paul's been a great partner and been doing a lot of great work with Sport and Dev. So I'm not sure if you wanted to just touch on that in terms of the three things you would recommend in terms of prioritizing first.
Well, one of the things I think for me is to really think about what your needs are and what you want to achieve with the evaluation, because that's really going to guide what you do, how you do it, what kind of questions you ask. So really having a strategy and plan in place to think about the process. That to me would be the first thing.
Okay.
Alisha?
Yeah, any final comments on that before we have questions from Marissa, and then I have one kind of wrap-up question. So
we can go on.
Move on. Yeah. So Marissa's asking a couple of really good questions. One is about examples of funders using reporting. And then also she asked a question about further training and certificate programs. So right up your alley for both of you. Perhaps maybe just a brief response there. And there is a question, maybe we'll wrap the last question also in terms of videos. I know that's come up before in terms of how to use video to sharing. And so perhaps kind of addressing those last two questions together.
Well, I can quickly share, my own plug. So I run a certificate program. It's the Sports Impact Certificate Program. And happy to share more about that. We do cover a lot of measurement and evaluation. We've had people build their own measurement tools from the program. There's others as well. And I mean, definitely different workshops, trainings. Kathy and I both probably share more with you on that. As far as the videos, of course it comes down to budget. So, and capacity, is there a team inside internally? Do you have a board member who maybe can lend their own resources or their own company to do it for you? I think if you get creative with it, there's probably ways to make it happen. And then as we shared, there's different ways of doing it now. There's more an animated version. It depends on your audience, like who are you talking to and what do they want to see? So those again, are very quick responses, but please reach out for more.
Yeah,
two things, sir, if I could just make a comment on that. Two things. I know Tracy Evans' organization, Kids Play International, does have a video that has some evaluation elements in it that was really effective. And I'm happy to share. I did a video on some research that I did on community sport organizations in Canada that we worked with an organization called Kindea. They were really great. I think the video cost, I mean, it depends on how long your video is, of course, you know, anywhere from, you know, $1,000 to higher. But I'm happy to share that video as an example of how to communicate research findings, evaluations for some sport organizations. So excellent. I could put that on send the link to that.
You're around. Well, excellent. Well, thank you. So I guess we're right up at the 10:02 mark, but I think we can maybe leave the chat box open. I know there was a question from Alisha and Kathy about what else is happening. You know, what are some of your questions? Are there other things that you can share? So perhaps we can leave it open for a few more minutes, just as we're wrapping up. I guess I just wanted to ask a kind of a little bit of a big picture question, but it's sort of something that I've been thinking about. Figure with both of you here to ask the question is kind of where do you think we are more broadly in terms of legitimizing sport and social impact? I mean, do you feel like we're now at a point of legitimacy that we don't have to question sport and the evidence, or do you, on a scale, you know, do you feel like we're far in the legitimizing standpoint, or do you feel like we're still kind of in the middle somewhere, or we're really behind the 8 ball? So I guess that's the question, just about like, how are we doing in terms of legitimizing sport impact?
I mean, I would say, having seen where it was 17 years
everything.
Yeah, I mean, 17 years ago, I don't think people understood what sports philanthropy was. So, you know, having seen that growth, I would say we've become so sophisticated and so validated by funding. And, you know, on the funder side, I see it too, that it's becoming definitely more respected. And I think we're getting there. I don't think we've reached that end of the spectrum yet, but I would say we're definitely past midway. And it's a large part to groups on who are here, that all the hard work that everyone does. And
exactly.
I think so with these organizations that are merging sport and dev, beyond sport, certificates like the one that Alisha is leading, those are sort of markers of legitimacy around sport, and as well as the actual on the ground work that people are doing. And from a research perspective, from an academic perspective, I know that sport for peace and development has grown as an emerging field. There's a new journal in the area. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of advancement, I think, in the legitimacy of this space. But as Alisha said, I think there's still plenty of room to go.
Sure. Well, good. Well, thank you for that. And so, it seems like we've had a lot of really good questions, kind of rapid fire. But we will maybe just, I know we had about at one point we had about 30 on the participants, and now we're at about 20. So I know we're a few minutes after 10. But again, just wanted to thank you, particularly Alisha and Kathy, for your excellent presentation and following up on your articles with Sport and Dev.
Thank you.
And thank you to Paul and to the Sport and Dev. Alina, I think, is on the line as well. So I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap up. We'll close out. We have it recorded, so we should be able to follow up maybe by tomorrow or end of the week with the materials. But great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
In case there's any comments that want to come in. So we'll just leave it open for maybe 2 more minutes, and we'll close out at like 10:08.
Okay.
Great. Well, hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And thank you all for joining and participating.
Thanks.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That was excellent.
Thanks.
Good. I'll just leave it open just in case folks
Yeah.
want to share any. I know you've had some questions, so.
Are we still on live, or is it just the three of us?
No, people are still on. Will there be more webinars? Yeah, I think that's a question in terms of other follow-up. I know with Sport and Dev, there's with Paul and others, there's definitely interest in doing more conversations. There's a lot of interest in these kind of conversations on different topics. So I think hopefully, and then perhaps for Kathy and
Yeah.
Alisha to think about another one in a few months. Yeah.
If anyone has any suggestions on topics or themes that they're interested in learning more about, you know, we really sped through all of these things. We could do a deeper dive into one or more of the areas, and we're happy to do that.
Yeah. I'm
Excellent.
going to share some of the links that we talked about in the Q&A.
Yeah, and I think just the continuing to follow up on the global perspectives and
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you everyone for participating. I think we'll go ahead and close out so we can all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for facilitating, Eli.
Excellent. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.